Hey everyone, and welcome to the Irenic Ref podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Gross. The word irenic means aimed at or aiming towards peace. And my goal with this podcast is to try to create a bridge between coaches and officials by showing the humanity of each other in a more robust way, which isn't necessarily achievable in the minimal interactions a coach and official may experience during a game. With all that said, let's get to it. Today's guest has been coaching for 14 years, 1 year at Winter as a freshman coach, 2 years as a grad assistant at Mount Marty, and the past 11 years as a head coach and going into his 12th year this upcoming year. Along with that, he is the longest tenured head coach in the program's history. He was selected as the SDHSAA Basketball Coach of the Year in 2018 and was a finalist for the award 2 other times. His teams have seen great success as they have qualified for the state tournament 7 out of the 11 years he has been the head coach. In 2020, prior to the cancellation of state tournaments, his team was number 1 in power points and the number 1 seed headed into the state tournament. He also led his teams to being crowned the South Dakota AA Boys State Champions in both 2018 and just last year in 2023. He has 155 career wins and is the all-time winningest coach at Yankton High School and recently surpassed Bob Winter, who had 151 career wins. Even though he is a great coach, he is also such a great player of the game that he once scored 20 points in the game without even making a field goal. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Coach Chris Haynes. Chris, thanks for coming on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me, Andrew. And I just think it's great, what you're doing here. I think a lot of people might think, coaches and refs and they don't like each other and stuff because a lot of people just see how we interact with each other on the court. And yeah, sometimes, that can be contentious in the heat of the moment. But at the end of the day, I think, refs and coaches are both alike, that we love the game and we're passionate about it, and we're passionate about kids, and we want kids to have a good experience. And I know we couldn't do what we do, obviously, without you guys. And we appreciate you guys, even though, like I said, on game night, sometimes it might seem a little different. But at the end of the day, and that's why I think it's great that you do these kind of things. So people that don't really get to see coaches and refs interact a lot, they can see that, we do both have appreciation for each other and a respect for each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those things where, when I get to a game, and I know there's something at stake in the game, whether that's, coaching career for you. You said you're the longest tenured coach. Some coaches don't get longer than 3 or 4 seasons. And so there's some things at stake when it comes to that. And we also got to know it's about the players, and it's about creating a fun environment for everyone, even the fans. Even if they might be some of the hardest critics for us, we still want to create that great environment for them. But yeah, with that said, let's talk about last year a little bit. You were the state champions out in Rapid City. A great environment out there. It was crazy to see how many from the East River, is that what you say it? East side of the state traveled out to West River to support their teams. But as I was noticing a lot of, I don't know if you want to call them box scores, just scores and things like that. A lot of the games that you had, a lot of your losses were within a 5 to 6 point margin. And so tell me about last year a little bit, how certain things, ended up with a loss, some things ended up with a win, and then how that all accumulated at the state tournament to turn into a state championship.
Yeah, I'd even go back to the year before, Andrew. Our team was a few games over 500 overall, or a couple games, whatever it ended up. And we were 8th at the state tournament. But still, I thought our guys got a lot of experience. We had 4 seniors a year ago, and then we had a lot of juniors this year. We had 8 seniors. So we had a lot of returning and a lot of experience coming back into this season. And even though things didn't go the way we would have liked at the state tournament, a year ago we got 8th, but we played really good, especially the first round. We played Roosevelt. We were the 8th seed.
Yeah.
Roosevelt was the 1 seed, undefeated, defending champs. And we played a great game. We came up a couple possessions short. Then things didn't go our way on Friday or Saturday afternoon. You get eighth, and it's kind of, but just getting to the state tournament again and having our guys have that experience, I think was huge, and some confidence in those games. And then, yeah, this year, you play 24 games, and we had an opportunity to win all 24, and that doesn't happen every year. And what I mean by that is just that you're in the game in the fourth quarter, so you have a chance to win it. It's a 6, 8, 10 point game in the fourth quarter at some point. And again, there's years where we even our best teams didn't have that. Some of our other best teams didn't have that, and this group they did. They give themselves a chance night in and night out to win every game, and that doesn't always mean you're going to win them, right?
Yeah.
But more times than not, our kids made enough plays at the end of the game to win, and I think a big credit to that. And I told people throughout the year, even before the year started, I know our local paper here, they do a great job. I got to give the Yankton Press and Dakota a shout out. They do a great job. And their opening article was on, we had 8 seniors and they were all multiple sport athletes. This is just a group of kids that grew up together playing football, playing basketball, running track, playing baseball. They just did everything together. And I think that competition, the competitiveness and toughness of the group really showed through throughout their careers. And I think maybe it's a little old school these days. I don't know if we can say that. I don't think we're that old yet, Andrew, but I might be a little older than you. But I just this group that we had of seniors, they were kind of old school in the fact that they did multiple sports, and they're in the Final Four in football in their class, and obviously made a great run in basketball and won it all. They got top 6 and placed at the state track meet, and then they were in the Final Four in baseball.
Yep.
And that same core group of athletes, and so they weren't afraid of the moment. They weren't afraid of the bright lights. They'd been there and done that in multiple sports, and I really think ultimately that experience and being in those situations in multiple sports really benefited us out in Rapid City. And also, I know you talked about the fans traveling out there. We were the farthest away. Obviously Sioux Falls is really close, but I really thought that Yankton, we had a great representation, and the whole state tournament. A lot of people had to travel across the state, and the weather wasn't great, if you remember, Andrew.
Mm-hmm.
And especially on Thursday, the weather wasn't great, but still people braved the weather and got out there. And I think we would have even had a few hundred more people if the weather would have cooperated. But yeah, to your question though about our guys, and we really just felt confident that if they were in the game late, that they would find a way to make plays and to get the job done. And like I said, more times than not, our guys did that. And it was nothing special from coaching or anything like that. It's just, those guys are competitors, and they're, I just think competitiveness and toughness were 2 words that I would use to describe last year.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely interesting to see some of those. I mean, you got a guy like Rugby who gets a gash on his face. Was it the second game and just, he's like, hey, get on my side, crowd. Like he just was pumping him up saying, hey, we're going to keep going from here. And that was one of those where I'm like, you see that in high school students, but like, I don't think you necessarily see it to that extent where the person gets taped up, they get right back in, and they're just as fired up as they were before.
Yeah, so that was opening round against Sioux Falls, Washington.
Yeah.
And Rugby might have had his worst game of his high school career in that game. I mean, he just played terrible. But he got cut at the end of the game, and we needed him in. And here's a good ref situation for you. So Schroeder, Schroeder, I'm sure Jeff very well. And so he's doing the game, and Rugby gets cut. He's bleeding on the court, and it's crunch time, right? And I know in the back of my mind that that the only way I can save Rugby and keep him in the game is by calling a timeout, right?
Mm-hmm.
So otherwise, the way it was bleeding, 30 seconds wasn't going to get us. We weren't going to get that taken care of. So Jeff comes over. He's like, hey, Chris, you got blood, and what are we going to do here? And I'm like, I'm kind of trying to small talk him just to buy our trainer some time. Our trainer's already over there looking at it and stuff. And Jeff, like 2 or 3 times, he's like, "Hey, Haynes, come on, like we got to get going here." And so I tried the gamesmanship as long as I could, and then finally he's like, "Seriously, Chris, like, what are you doing?" I'm like, "Okay, I'm going to call a timeout." He's like,
Yep.
"Okay." So we call a timeout, and our trainer couldn't get it stopped bleeding like he's doing. And we have a great trainer, Trevor Woods, and does a great job for us. And he's been in that situation numerous times. And finally, like he's trying to get it and he can't. And so bandaged up because, with the band-aid, the blood just keeps
Yep.
going. So he finally just taped it and just pre-wrap around his head. That's the only way he could get it like to stop bleeding and stuff. And
Yep.
rugby in perfect rugby fashion, it kind of sums up again the senior class. He just had fun with it, right?
Yep.
And he comes out there smiling and doing the Ninja Turtle thing or whatever he was doing. And really, that was that entire senior class. And we did a lot of things in practice, Andrew, and we try to make it fun for the guys and make it competitive. Or even if we're doing a drill, we'll keep score. And sometimes groups of kids, well, they'll be like, well, it doesn't really matter if you win in practice. And, maybe that doesn't motivate them. But for this group, and even all the way down from when they're in elementary, middle school, and high school, and even last year when they were seniors, they just bought into that. And anytime we had a competition in practice, they made it like it was the end of the world, whether they won or lost, and just had fun with it. Every day was so fun coming to practice just because of the kids' attitudes. And I think the situation you're talking there with about rugby when that happened kind of sums up rugby and our whole group. And of course, rugby was our leader. And we had a lot of leaders on the team, but there's no doubt rugby was our leader, and guys kind of followed him. And he was like that in practice. And so when that situation happened and rugby handled it that way, it was really no surprise to any of us or his teammates. They're just like, well, that's just rugby.
Yeah. And the good thing about a team like yours is, especially when they treat practice that way, is that you see it in the game, but then you're also like, as an official, this is the type of game I want to be in, because even if the score is 10, it's still within reach. There's nothing that's out of reach for a team that puts that much weight on practice or puts that much weight on, we got to win this game. And so as an official, I enjoy those games because I know I got to be on my best, because if I miss something and it's 10 points, I'm going to hear from you or I'm going to hear from a player, which rightly so, I should in that regard.
Yeah, no doubt. Our guys, and I go back at it, you probably don't remember it, but when rugby was a sophomore, so Matthew was a senior, and we're playing at
Yep.
the Pentagon against Harrisburg, and Harrisburg had a really good team. And we're down. We weren't playing very well, and Harrisburg had a great game plan, and Langrock's teams always guarded Matthew and our teams well. And he had a great game plan, and we just couldn't get anything going. And we're down like 15 and a half or something. We're down 20, almost like 19 or 20 going to the fourth quarter. It's not looking very good. But never say die. And rugby kind of put us on his back as a sophomore and went and had like 12 straight points or something. And Matt came in as a sophomore, hadn't played much at that point in the year, and came in, had a couple key steals and a couple key baskets. We hit a couple shots. And next thing you know, we have a chance to win the thing. Ultimately, we came up a little bit short, but I just think that's a good example of the fire you're kind of talking about, and the never quit attitude from the guys. And again, yeah, I think our group, they played all 32 minutes. And that's something that we try to instill. And again, with groups, you try to instill that, hey, play hard no matter what the score is, right?
Yep.
And but with this group, they really did that, and they just enjoyed playing. I think was the biggest thing. They love coming to practice. They love the games, and they wanted to make the most out of all 32 minutes, regardless of what the score was.
Yeah. And like I said, I could definitely see that each game, whether I was watching, I don't think I officiated you guys this past year, but every game I watched, I definitely saw that. So jumping into a different topic, a different vein here, tell us more about yourself, like where you grew up, your family, hobbies, things of that nature.
Sure. So I was born and raised in Winter. My parents, my dad from Valentine, Nebraska, my mom from Minden, Nebraska, small town by Kearney. And then I had two older brothers that were born in Valentine. My parents moved to Winter right before I was born, and have a younger brother. So four boys. God bless my mom. I don't know how she got through that, but and yeah, going to school and from a young age, I always had a ball in my hands and wanted to play sports and that kind of stuff, and was fortunate in high school to be a three sport athlete, four sport, played, and that's what you do in winter. There's really nothing else to do. So you play football, basketball, track, baseball. That's just what we did. There was no other option. So I'm very in tune, I guess, and sympathetic to multiple sport athletes and trying to build those relationships here in Yankton too. Like one of my best friends is Brady Muth, our football coach, and Drew Lawrence is a baseball coach, and Yeomans, and now Coach Gross at track, and we all have a great relationship, and we all, that multiple sport athlete thing, we really push here in Yankton, and we really encourage each other to do, and all of us coaches have a good working relationship where we try to make that work for our athletes. Um, but yeah, I grew up in Winter and was fortunate enough to play for a great coach and Jim Drake, and really Andrew, our program is based on him, and I'm not smart enough to come up with anything on my own, and everything we do in Yankton here, we've copied or stole from someone else, and most of that, especially the backbone of our program and our philosophy, is from Coach and playing from him. um, and so that was just a great experience, and couldn't ask for a better coach to play for. And then went on to college at Dakota Wesleyan, got my undergrad in education and history there. Played for another great coach, and Jim Martin, who was another great influence on my life. And from there, then I went back home after I graduated, and I still had a semester of student teaching left, so I taught and helped coach when I was there. And then I moved to Yankton. So Coach Jim Thorson was still the coach at Mount Marty at that time, and he was looking for a grad assistant. And at the NAI level, sometimes coaches they'll take anything that they can get as far as some help. And so he needed, obviously he was pretty desperate. He needed someone to help. So I came down here and helped him out as a graduate assistant for a couple of years. And again, that was a great experience. You think after playing in high school and playing in college, and you think you might know a couple things about basketball, and then you get into coaching and you're like, oh yeah, I don't know, I didn't know anything. Right. So I learned a lot for those years, a couple years under Coach Thorson as well. And then a job opened up in Yankton, a teaching job, because then right, I had my master's now, 2 years of doing that, and now it's time for the real world. I couldn't push off the real world any longer. I wanted to, Andrew, but I
Yep.
couldn't. It was time to start paying some bills and that kind of stuff. So yeah, teaching job opened up in Yankton. Bob Winter was the AD, and Wayne Kindle at that time was the principal. He's our superintendent now, but he was a principal. Wally Bosch was the assistant principal. So those three, hired me, and appreciative of that and the opportunity that those guys gave me here in Yankton, and kind of taking a chance on a guy who had no really head coaching experience, and then you're going to throw him into the fire of the ESD, and which is not easy at 27 years old or whatever I was, and again learn some hard lessons right away. But I'll tell you too, Andrew, is Arlen Lickness was our JV coach
Yep.
the time I got the job, and I wouldn't have made it those first few years without Arlen. I just his experience and the mentor like that. I remember our first year, we had 5 games before Christmas, and we were 0-5 going into Christmas break. And our last game before Christmas was the last day of before semester, and we're up in Aberdeen, and we lose. And so then you have to drive 4.5 hours home, right? And you get home, and it's December 22nd or whatever it was, and it's -20 out, and just like you're 0-5, and first year coach, you're like, oh, what did I get myself into? And so everyone leaves when we get home. Got the bus cleaned up. Everyone leaves. It's 2:30 in the morning or whatever it is, And I just remember telling Arlen, like, oh, I don't know how this is going to go, coach. And he just kind of laughs and he goes, don't worry. Someday we'll look back on this and we'll laugh at this moment. At the time, I was like, coach, you're crazy. I don't know what you're talking about. Like, we're terrible. We're 0-5. We're never going to win a game. And, but yeah, so having him there, those first few years and then all the way, when we won it in 2018, he was still JV coach. And obviously he retired shortly after that. But just things like that. I've been very fortunate to have a lot of mentors and great mentors in my life and great coaches I played for or worked with. That again, I hope when they, Coach Drake especially, I hope guys like that when they come back and watch us play that they can see some of the things in our program that they have instilled. I hope they can see some of those things. Um, Also learn too, though, that you have to be yourself. I think the first few years that I was a coach, I tried to almost try to copy and be like Coach Drake.
Mhm.
And, you realize that you can't do that either. Right? You have to be yourself. And I know Coach Drake would be the first one to tell me that advice. But that's just kind of the way it is. And so tried to live by that. And here you go. And next thing you know, it's been 12 years, Andrew.
Yeah, yeah. And what you said kind of resonates as an official as well. I mean, speaking of a guy like Jeff Schroeder, like there's things that he can do and say that there's no way I can copy and paste because it definitely won't resonate with the coach. But I can take other things that he has, copy, paste, and go from there. But speaking about the people you're talking about that you kind of got into the realms of how you got started involved in coaching and maybe a little bit of influences, Coach Drake there. Is there any other influences in your coaching that kind of spurred you on to, again, you talked about Arlen as well. Is there anybody else that kind of influenced you and also kind of pushed you towards that coaching realm?
Yeah, I think also I feel very fortunate. The old saying, if find something that you love and you'll never work a day in your life kind of
Yeah.
thing. Ever since I was a little guy and realized that, well, the NFL or the NBA or Major League Baseball is probably not in the realm of possibilities. As soon as I figured that out, the only other real thing I ever wanted to do was teach and coach because I just love being a part of a team. I love the competition. I love the locker room, the road trips, the grind of it, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I grew up. I had great parents. They're very, couldn't ask for better parents. And even that, with a great family and support system, I still don't know where I would be in life without my teachers and coaches, though, too, with that.
Yeah.
And so Coach Nas. So Harvey Nas, everyone knows him from Winter, and then his son Brian Nas was my football coach, and then like I said, Coach Drake. Coach Jeff Gross was track coach, and just had a lot of those. And then yeah, I go to college and you get to play for someone like Jim Martin. That's just you're so lucky and fortunate of that. And then yeah, Coach Thorson and Coach Lickness, two others. I mean, you start thinking about those names and South Dakota basketball and in South Dakota coaching pedigree and history. Those guys are up there and can hold water with anybody. And so
Hmm.
if you got the experience just to be under one of them, to play for one of them, or to coach under one of them, or with one of them for a year or 2 years, you would consider yourself very fortunate. Well, I got to grow up, and all I ever knew was that this is the way it is. And so then you get outside and you think, well, that's the only way that there is. And then you start realizing that the little things that they did that you just took for granted as a player, or with Coach Drake or with Coach Martin or Coach Thorson's program, the little things you took for granted as a player, you just thought when you were going through it that, well, yeah, this makes sense. This is what everyone does. But you realize that's not what everyone does. And so you get out and the things that were just instilled in me by those guys that I didn't necessarily have to learn because they were instilled in me, that other coaches have had to go through hardships to try to figure out and learn. And not that I have everything figured out by any means, or that I haven't went through hardships, but I just it's a testament to what I'm trying to say. I guess it's a testament to those programs and those coaches that I was under. That a lot of those things that maybe You have to do some growing pains. I was fortunate enough already to, well, this is just the way it is. And because of those guys and those guys I played for and coached with.
Yeah, and I think something similar is like, when you're building a house, if you don't have a good foundation, you're probably not going to have a good house. And so, in that same vein, is like if you wouldn't have had the solid foundation of the coaches and the people above you, you probably wouldn't have, not, I would say you wouldn't be as successful, but you would have you had an easier transition to being a good coach versus someone who's hadn't had that upbringing, hadn't had that experience with those coaches, and had to fundamentally change everything from the ground up and go from there. And so, I mean, I don't want to say you didn't have anything difficult to do or change some things, but I think, like someone you mentioned, it helped having that foundation very solid, and then you could build off and do your own thing with that.
No doubt. And again, I think at the time when you're going through it, you take it for granted that of like you said, just the foundation, the base, and the philosophy of a program. Um, very fortunate. I think Coach Drake is as good as it gets when it comes to running a high school program. And when I say that, I mean from a whole scope. There's a lot that goes into that, and well beyond just what you're doing on the basketball court.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Coach Drake was really good at that. I mean, he won over 400 games. So he's up in top 10 or 15 or whatever he is all time in state history and wins. So he obviously knew what he was doing on the court. But even more than that, just the things that he instilled in his athletes and his players, and holding them accountable. We even to today, like there's like two men in my life when you talk about them, like I still have a little bit of fear, and that's my dad and Coach Drake. It's like if Coach Drake was here, I'd just be like, okay, I got to make sure that I'm on my toes here.
Yeah.
And that's just the presence and the influence that he had on his athletes, and it's because he did things the right way. He would never sacrifice a win in order to maybe teach us a lesson or something that was bigger beyond basketball. And he was very open about that with us. And the other thing is that we knew he was doing that because he cared about us. And as high schools obviously passed, and college, and now into my career, still have a good relationship with Coach, and communicate with him quite often, and maybe more than he wants me to communicate with him. I'm calling him all the time or texting him about advice and things. I remember, so obviously Matthew Moore's, we brought him up as a seventh and eighth grader, and I remember Coach came down to my classroom and just because he obviously had great players that he played for. I mean, Sam Goodhope was a Mr. Basketball in 1986. Donnie Goldel was a really good player in 1988, went on to be All-American at Northern. Coach Drake's son, Jay, who's the head coach at Vermillion, was a great player. So he had those star players, and he just came down and really gave me great advice on how to coach a player like that. And not just the fact of what he needs to do, but also what the team needs to do around that. So, yeah, very fortunate about that, to have that solid foundation and base of coaches that I played for and coached with.
Yeah. And now getting into a little bit more, tell me a fun story about your coaching experience. I mean, you kind of mentioned that 0-5 one, that might be one, but then along with that, maybe a memorable interaction with myself or another official. It doesn't have to be me, because I know you've definitely had more officials in your time coaching. So yeah, a fun story coaching with your team, another one with an official.
Yeah, I think officials. I love the interaction. I really do. I know that maybe there's a little too much going on between coaches and refs right now, and they're trying to clean that up, which I totally get. But I also think that a lot of coaches that are refs that have been in it for a long time, they like that interaction, with officials too, and kind of the back and forth. And as long as at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, because and so Chad Gordon's here. I'm sure you know Chad well.
Yeah.
He's in Yankton. Talk with Chad quite often. And I tell Chad all the time, I'm like, we're very fortunate with the refs we have in South Dakota, and I really firmly believe that we got the right refs at the right levels, and doing the right games. And again, even in the moment when I may not agree with the refs call, when I watch, with Huddle too, the last 10 years, you can watch so many games.
Yep.
And we do watch so many more games than we used to when you had to travel to watch games and scout and that kind of stuff. And when I watch games, very rarely, I mean, the refs are doing a great job, and they really are. And the games are officiated at a high level for high school basketball here in South Dakota. And so I hope that we get to continue to have that little back and forth um, with officials. And I think officials like that a little bit. Now, again, no one wants to get yelled at every single play, and maybe that's why officials don't want to come ref in Yankton, because they think I yell at too much. But I like the back and forth with the officials. I hope they like that. And I think, yeah, we've had really great opportunities, but it's hard to pinpoint maybe one moment with officials or anything like that, or even, with coaching. It just what it comes down to, and I think, maybe you'd probably agree with this, Andrew. It's just, the past 12, 15 years, being a coach is the relationships that you build, obviously with the players. And I'm getting to the point now where former players are getting married and having kids. So they're becoming husbands or becoming fathers, and you're going to their weddings, and they're inviting you over when their kids are born. And that's pretty special.
Hmm.
And so that's awesome. And same thing, with refs. Mutter's right down the road. Selch is right down the road from here. And Selch or Mutter always has a big Final Four gathering or whatever, or Selch, and seeing those guys and get to sit down and visit with them and hear their stories, and they hear your stories, and
Yeah.
kind of going back and forth. And I think that's what makes South Dakota basketball so special.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's and I think that's one thing that some of fans don't necessarily see, and it almost makes it worse, because it's like if you don't know this, you just kind of see the emotion of that coach, and it's like, okay, well, I gotta hate that official too, or not really, but
Yeah,
I gotta yell at that official now too. But
yeah,
it's unfortunate, but I think it kind of ebbs and flows of how things happen in the officiating world, and it's kind of one of those things. I think it's official that's like, hey, just grit down, bear it. You're gonna make it through if you get through the first 3 or 4 years. So yeah, following up with that, tell me about a rule that you were glad was added or maybe modified, and then maybe one that you do not like, wish was removed, or wish was modified.
yeah. Well, I really like that they brought in the replay at the state tournament.
Yep.
I'm kidding.
Sure.
I'm kidding. No, but no, I'm not a big really stickler on getting into the details of the rule. I know the block charge circle is a big one right now. Personally, again, going back, like with Coach Drake, taking charges was a big part of the program.
Yeah.
We don't do it near as well as he did in winter, but that's something we pride ourselves in, or try to. So I hope that that's something that stays. I don't know what the refs, I guess, kind of consensus is on
Hmm.
adding that circle in there. I think it would be hard. Maybe it'd make it easier, because that's, to me, that's the hardest call in basketball.
Yep.
The block charge. I mean, that's a really tough one. They're always bang bang, and it can go either way. And there's a lot of it happens so fast. I remember, obviously when we had Matthew,
Yep.
people would try taking charges on him, but he took off from so far out. And
Yep.
when people are sliding under him, or are they not sliding under him? And when you get the more athletic kids are getting, the harder
Yeah.
that's becoming. So maybe at a certain point we have to bring it in, just because as athletes are getting bigger and stronger and faster.
Yep.
Um, but I don't know. What do you think about that? Are you like, what's the consensus on the refs? Because also it adds another dynamic where you have to see now if the defender is on the line or outside the line, and not only if he's moving.
Yeah, I'm a little different, I guess, than most people. I have done this in the college realm, and so
Sure.
it's a little bit easier. But then it also is there's a caveat between, is it the NBA or is it the NCAA men's? And so the NCAA men's and the NBA is quite different in that regard. So it could be a little easier, I think, in the NBA versus the NCAA men. But then NCAA men also adjusted a rule this year for block charges, so that's going to make it a little bit more lenient towards the offensive player. So I either way, I'm indifferent. I think I'm young enough that I can adapt, and I've had rules adapt, every year since I've been in it. So, which is a little bit different than some coaches and most officials that have been in for 30 years where I hadn't seen a change for probably like 15 years.
Right.
So anyway, yeah,
Yeah.
that's my take.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like that one's going to be a tough one. And we need younger officials, obviously, and guys like yourself that get into it at a young age and can get through those first few years. And once they can do that, just like you said, it seems like if they can get through their first few years and then they really enjoy it. But yeah, we also have some older officials, and all of a sudden, is that going to be a big change for them, and how are they going to adjust? I think they'll be fine, but that's the big one to me. And are we going to put that in? The shot clock, I was a huge proponent of that. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's been great for South Dakota. There's still a lot of states, and as you know, even around us, that still don't have a
Yeah.
shot clock in high school basketball. So I just think coaches like coaching more with the shot clock. Players like playing. Fans like watching. Refs like reffing games more
Yeah.
when you have the shot clock. So I'm a huge proponent of that. I think that was a big step for South Dakota high school basketball. And again, when you look around the nation, still not everyone has it. And so that was a big positive. So yeah, something like that. The other one that maybe sticks out was a free throw. We went back and forth on whether you could go on the release of the shot or whether they have to
Yeah.
wait till it's the rim, and where's the first defender? Are they going to be underneath the block or outside the block? Um, because again, a lot of people might just kind of shrug that off like that's not a big thing. That's a big thing.
Yeah.
And for coaches, to practice that and things. So that's a big one. I'm a proponent of kind of going when kind of how we have it. You can go when the free throw is released and got to give the defense more room up the block so they don't get pinned in too.
Yeah, I think that's something to note because I think so many people just watching the game like, oh, this is just a free throw. But the reality is, if it's what I think right when I was starting, it was that lower one right below the block. The person just basically had to turn and pin the person and they could get a rebound. And
Yeah.
now moving that up, you're like, okay, and now we can go on the release versus someone, I mean, obviously you would have to practice free throws a lot more if it's the rim contact. Now it's just like, okay, this is the release. I mean, there are some funky releases sometimes, but it's less of an area to coach, which is helpful. I think it's kind of like special teams in football. Like
Yep.
you need to coach those areas, but if you can concentrate a little bit more on the defense and the offensive portions, and those ones kind of fall where they may, it's a little bit easier to play a game. But I mean, that's just my opinion from an official standpoint.
I would agree with that 100%. Yeah. It's because the way we have it now, it's more of a traditional blockout, right?
Yeah.
And if the other team's shooting, and so yeah, I like it the way it is, but it's just kind of crazy how over time it's went back and forth and things like that. So yeah, but I think South Dakota high school basketball is in a good spot with our rules. I think our officials do a good job of looking at little things like that and bringing them to the attention of the High School Activities Association
Yep.
and getting through those. And then also the communication. I mean, the newsletters that are sent out before the year starts, taking those classes. It only takes an hour, but you get it. You see, and over the years, also the ref placement. Where you guys are supposed to be at,
Yep.
and your kind of rotations, and going from 2 refs to 3 refs. I
Yeah.
think has I would hope has benefited you guys and makes it a little bit easier on your legs.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with that. I can't say much because I came in with pretty much 3-man system. I had maybe 4 games that I did 2-person and really quickly realized how terrible of an official I was. And as soon as 3-man came along, I realized that I'm a little bit better of an official, but I'm not super great. But yeah, the rules and they're changing. It's been fun to see and fun to adapt to. Sometimes it's not so great, but speaking of that, a rule that you didn't like or wish was modified, or I don't know, something along the negative sort of realm of the rules that you've seen.
Yeah, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I don't know about that. I just basketball. in general, maybe it's just getting physical across the board, right?
Sure.
And I think a lot of times things start at the highest level NBA and kind of work their way down. And you see back in the 80s, the NBA is so physical and people getting beat up and
Yep.
and now they're trying to let athletes be athletes. And even though that might not suit us, when we're going up against the Sioux Falls schools when they have all their athletes, but just in general, trying to clean up the game and make it more free flowing and kind of how the game was maybe intended. Even though, we're probably as guilty as anyone is trying to play physical and hard within the rules as you can and push the envelope as much as you can. Um, but yeah, I would say just in general that, but I don't know, overall of, like I'm thinking maybe the jump ball,
Okay.
the old jump ball of every time you had a jump ball, you literally jump it up, kind of
Yeah,
like the NBA does. I wouldn't mind going back and seeing that instead of the alternating possession.
sure. I gotta press you on this one because the new rule, the five fouls, the two free throw shots after the five fouls and the reset. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, so it's every quarter, right?
Yeah, every quarter reset to, and then once it
And
gets to
there's no
five,
1-and-1.
no one and one. Yep.
Yep. So that's where I'm kind of torn. I do like the five fouls, and then and then you get to shoot every quarter, and then it gets reset. Um, but the 1-and-1 really made things interesting at the end of games.
Yep.
So I think that's gonna be different, no doubt, and definitely strategy there. And obviously with the 1-and-1, a huge premium on pressure and on making your free throws. Right away, if you can go to the double bonus, that's definitely going to change things. No doubt about it. I think overall, if if you don't want if you don't like it, well then don't be down at the end of the game, right?
Yeah.
Have the lead at the end of the game. And so, that's kind of what it goes down to. If you're ahead at the end of the game and all of a sudden, now it's five fouls and you get two free throws, you're going to like it. If you're down, you're not going to like it. You'd like to have a couple 1-and-1 opportunities, but well, don't put yourself in that situation, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Last question I have for you is what advice would you give to a newer official? Maybe they have you for the first time, or they're starting to work double A, or even just a B game. What's an advice from a coaching perspective that you would like to give to that newer official?
Yeah, I think the best officials we have is ones that are willing to, kind of like what you said, learn. Um, when we're young, we all think we know everything, and even as I get older, people probably think I know more than I do. But it's just stick with it. I think if you love the game and you have a passion for it, and the first few years might be a little bit tough, but with fans and all that kind of stuff. But if you really love the game and the atmosphere and want to be a part of it, I would just say stick with it. And if you don't get a state tournament your first year, it's okay. There's nothing wrong with building up to that. And if you get a this state tournament, but you wanted that state tournament, we'll just keep working hard and keep getting better. And coaches will, and people around the state and the advisors and people to go watch refs, they'll notice those things and put your time in, just like coaches do and players do in the off season. Go try to do some things and enjoy it. Right, that's what you have to do. Enjoy the relationships with the other officials. Grab a crew or a couple crews, some guys that you really like to officiate with. Get together with them in the off season. Make it a bonding thing. And I think if you do that and you stick with it for a few years and you get to know some people and develop those relationships, you'll really enjoy it, and you'll have a lot of fun and some great friendships along the way, and some great relationships that might be the best that you've had in your life. I think a lot of the refs that I know, that have done it for a long time. That's what they love about it. Obviously, you get into those environments, and they're hostile environments, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, you might be where the whole gym's screaming at you and yelling at you, but you have to love that. You have to relish those moments, and it's not always going to go right. There's going to be times where players miss game last second shots. Refs are going to miss last second calls, and it's going to happen. But if you like being in those atmospheres and those environments and a part of those types of games, it's a great way to stay involved. And again, and to help kids. And I think that's what we, especially here at the high school level, that's what we all want. So not only can you be involved in a game we love and building relationships, but then you can continue to give kids that experience that we all love so much in South Dakota and high school sports. And because I don't want to see that go away, and I fear, hopefully not for a long time, but maybe at high school sports, AU scene or whatever. I just think it's such a great thing that the communities have such pride in their schools and their athletics and activities, and we got to keep that going. And obviously, we can't do that without referees. And our game, I think, is still in a good place right now, and we got to keep it that way.
Yeah, appreciate those comments and what you've said to newer officials, and I hope whoever hears those takes those to heart. Because yeah, I think for me as well, like the beginning stages were like, oh man, am I ever gonna get a postseason game, or am I ever gonna get this? And it's just like you gotta wait it out, unfortunately. But if you're good and you get better, you're gonna get noticed, like you mentioned. So appreciate
Yeah,
that.
yeah, I think it's with anything in life, right? And then when you do anything in life is that's worthwhile, is it's not going to be easy.
Yeah,
And that's how it should be. And you gotta work at it and make it a craft. And no one's doing it, full time, for the money, right? You're
yeah,
traveling. Oh man, I can't. Our travel is terrible, and your guys' travel is too. And you're traveling across the state for $100, and losing your whole Friday night or whole Saturday to ref a basketball game, a high school basketball game. And to a lot of people, it's like, well, why would you ever do that? But once you get into it, once you start doing it, and like you said, work your way into it. And yeah, so if you don't get, some of those big games or state tournaments or whatever right away, it's like just keep working at it, and you'll get there.
yeah. I think that's something that officials and coaches can bond over, the fact that we have long trips and low pay for it, but
Yeah.
but we love the
Yes.
game so much that we keep doing it.
That's right.
Yeah. Again, thank you, Chris, for being on the podcast today. Any last words for anyone watching?
No, just, thanks for having me. And again, kind of like what we kicked off. We do. We obviously have, even though like I said, we have great refs here and guys doing the right level games. We're getting to the point where we have a shortage, and it's across the board, and it seems like across the nation, reffing shortage. And coaching is the same way. We got coaching shortage, and there's a lot of factors externally of driving people away from reffing and coaching. So, but I think the other side of it is when you see outside the lines, coaches and refs, we understand that we're all in it for basically the same reasons and the right reasons. And you got good people trying to help kids and give kids a good experience.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's exactly what we're trying to do here. And again, thank you again, Chris, for being on the show. This has been the Irenic Ref podcast. I'm Andrew Gross, and we'll see you all later.